Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome, everyone, into Garden of Doom. And this week, I cannot tell you how long it's been for me to put together a show where anyone with any credibility would talk to me about the rebooted version of Battlestar Gallactica. And so on a recent episode of Garden Views, I had my guest Matt Williams on, and he's a science and space journalist, and he's also a science fiction author. So in that conversation, we start talking about some of our, favorite science fiction shows. I actually think I presented the question something like, who got it wrong, who got it right? But, and it was a real question, but I'm always using it to try to find out who's interested in the shows I love or the shows I hate. So it turns out that Matt loves Battlestar Galactica, the rebooted episode, and another show I love, Babylon 5. But today we're going to focus on Battlestar Galactica. But first, we're going to say hello, Matt. Matt, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and just tell the folks you are in case they didn't listen to the Garden View show.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so yes, my name is Matt Williams, and I'm a science communicator. So what that means is I write space and astronomy related articles for Universe Today and interesting engineering. But I also do a lot of writing about the futurism, technology and society in the future. And that is part of why I also write science fiction. I'm just endlessly fascinated with those things. I have a podcast series that will be launching imminently on an ITSP Magazine's channel, and I'm also going to be teaching a course in the fall through the Kepler Space Institute about Mars, Martian exploration, and Mars in pop culture, and that includes science fiction. That's a pretty good précis, I think, of that there. And one other thing, there's a book's coming out soon that was put together by NASA scientist Les Johnson, and who was also heavily involved in science literature, and including science fiction. Yeah, and they put together a book about how humans could settle on planets that orbit red dwarf stars soon. And I contributed a technical paper on how they could actually terraform planets around red dwarfs so that they'd be more accommodating, because there's plenty of indications that show that they might not be. But
perfect. Okay, so folks, a few things for those of you who are usual Garden of Doom listeners and you're not really interested in the pop culture stuff. Stick around, because this show ties everything in together. We're going to talk about a lot of your favorite questions and topics as well in the context of Battlestar Galactica. Also, I need you all to understand that I'm old enough to remember that Battlestar Galactica was first a movie and then was a TV show starring Lauren Green and Richard Hatch, who actually is in the show we're going to be talking about. And this is not necessarily about the original Battlestar Galactica. It's to me largely about the reboot series, which was taken much more seriously. Though there are some throwbacks, there's some Easter eggs, some of the technology is the same, some of the older models of the Cylons and the Raiders. And every now and then, the old Battlestar Galactica sort of played with bigger concepts. Like they had I think it was a 2-part episode where they found this giant, like, white star ship moving through the universe. And when the colonial pilots got there, their uniforms magically turned to white. And there was someone named Count Iblis there, who at the time, like, Count Iblis, that's evil. Well, it was, but I later learned that Iblis is like the Sumerian version of like Baal or some like prince of Hades, so some prince of hell in the Bible. Iblis is actually just either a Sumerian, Babylonian, or Canaanite translation of the same thing. So there's some cool stuff there, but this is not going to be that show with Boxy, the campy little robot guy. So this Battlestar Galactica came out probably in the early aughts. I think it was a 5-year series. They had a follow-up movie, which was actually a bit of a prequel, not exactly. Well, they had a show called Caprica, which was a prequel, and then they had a movie afterwards called The Plan, where I think they spent it trying to explain why they didn't really quite have a plan, but we're going to explore all that. So, Battlestar Galactica. The premise. I think I've spoken for a bit, so let's let Matt give the premise so he can have his turn.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm trying to tie the original and the newer one together. But basically, the idea was that humanity lives on 12 worlds in this future. They're known as the 12 colonies, and they've been at war with the Cylons for some time. There's an opportunity for peace, which turns out to be a big fat betrayal and sneak attack. And basically humanity is brought to the edge of extinction from that. And so they've got to pick up the pieces. And the only thing they've got to go on is there's a legend of a 13th tribe, a 13th colony called Earth. And it's the only place we have to go, the only direction, the only solace we have. So they are returning, or they're heading for this sort of promised land. They're having this big, huge exodus. What's left of humanity is now trying to get out of Cylon controlled space and make it all the way to Earth. In the original, something I found kind of intriguing, the Cylons were actually robots. They were created by an alien race, which has all but gone extinct. They sort of reveal over time. But in the reboot, they decided that a lot of their older, campier sci-fi elements, they were just going to ditch those. So in the updated universe, humanity is alone as far as intelligent life is concerned. They haven't met any alien species, haven't found any evidence of them. And the Cylons were created by humanity. And so it became this classic, our inventions turn against us there. We gave them sentience, and then they wanted to, use it and be free. But at the same time, so that's, the Cylons in the updated series, it's that they fought us in the past. They fled from our known universe, and now they've come back after, I think 20, 40 years or so.
It was 40 years. Yeah.
40 years.
So what happened, there was a war where the Cylons, who were, as Matt said correctly, were our inventions. They basically are our servant class. They discovered the singularity, Terminator style, and decided to go to war. And at some point, I guess it was a stalemate or whatever, and they left. And the show picks up 40 years after that war ended, so to speak. But there's an embassy somewhere in space, and every year a diplomat from Earth is supposed to meet a diplomat from Cylon. And every year for the previous 39 years, nobody shows up. This year, the doors open up. 2 Cylon Centurions come in. They look much more modern and sleek than the ones that we remember from the old 1979 show. And also comes this slinky blonde wearing this red dress, which is always perilously just one gravitational degree from falling off, which, was magnificent in its own way. And obviously the colonial envoy is surprised, doesn't know what to make of it, and he's sort of stuttering for words. And she starts speaking to him. He thinks that she's human. And basically she reveals, while she's seducing him, and really he had no chance because he's some regular, middle-aged, schlub, and well, she's like, every man's fantasy. And she starts kissing him and reveals that she's a robot too, and then her kissing becomes basically killing him, basically, tearing him up from the inside, and you hear his screams, and then the war starts. So Battlestar Galactica, there's like 2 aspects to it. There might be more than 2. So one is sort of the reality of space science and how it evolves. So you have the Cylons use nukes, for instance. They talk about gravity. There's a situation where, and we'll probably get to all this, but the internet or wireless is a major reason why there's a Battlestar Galactica. There's things like water shortages and food shortages, labor shortages. There's definitely caste systems, and there's different religions, and it gets really meta. So there's also the spiritual side, but the spiritual side has many, many levels. And I don't think it's an accident that it was the 12 colonies. They're loosely named like our constellations. You have Capricorn and Gemini, and I don't know if they were all the constellations, but they were all constellations. And yes, there was a 13th lost tribe. There was a lot of symbols. But the interesting thing is that the humans were pagans. They believed in the gods, whereas the Cylons, it turns out, were monotheists. They believed in a god. So it was a strange sort of juxtaposition, and sort of a bigger question is like, what is evolution? So I don't know really where to start. I don't know if you want to start with sort of like the sciencey stuff, which they sometimes remembered. And like one of the things I remember is like early on, the Cylons in one of the first episodes bombed the water supply. And it was a great visual. It explodes from the outside. The water goes out. It instantly turns into crystal because it freezes instantly. And the colonists have no water. But the Cylons never do that again. Like it seems like there were plenty of times where they could have taken them out. And we don't know why they didn't. And I think like almost from episode 5 or 6, the writers were trying to retrofit the rest of the series to explain why they were ready to nuke everyone, but didn't. So you can sort of chime in here. I think this is probably because I don't really know where to end.
Yeah. Well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, one thing that I absolutely adored the first 2 seasons. The first season and the first half of the second season, it had me completely and utterly hooked by that point, right? So, and I watched it all the way through to completion. But yeah, it was very complex and layered to the point that it did feel helpful when, the plan came out, and they're like, let's show this from the backstory here, from the Cylons' point of view, who were like embedded with the fleet and what they were doing. And I remember just thinking, it's like, oh yeah, okay, so that's it. Because a lot of the time throughout the series, I was kind of like, what's their goal here? What's the Cylons' goal? Why are they, they tried to wipe out humanity. This fleet of refugees is fleeing. Are they not trying to wipe them out here, or are they just studying them for propaganda purposes, or just to see what they do? But yeah, it's well, in terms of the technical stuff, yeah, that I thought was one of the most brilliant things. They show, like in the very first episode, right, where you mentioned the diplomatic station where they're meeting, right, and the diplomats looking at papers on the Cylons, and they're very clearly out of date, right? It's like, this is what they looked like when last we saw them, and it's designs from the original show. And I thought, oh, that's genius, right?
Yeah, the museum, right?
Yeah. And it's like, well, we don't acknowledge the events of the previous show. No, we're sort of recreating that, but we're going to take all of the campy 70s looking robot designs and spacecraft designs, all that, and we're going to say that's from the last war. And then, of course, in come these brand new looking Cylons. It's like, whoa, they got way more streamlined and efficient, and they can look like us now too. They're flesh and blood, and yeah, and the fact that they had a religion. Oh, well, pinning that. Yeah, sorry, keeping with the technical stuff. That was also a very brilliant explanation for why the Galactica looked the way it did. It's like, this is a 40-year-old warship, but it's from a time when basically having networked computers, having all this wireless technology was a liability, because the Cylons, that's how they were connected. They could hack into any system instantly, and they are, so much smarter in terms of computing and programming and code that's how they'd kill you. They'd shut your systems down and paralyze you, and then just roll over and destroy you. So they had to go old tech. They had to have wired transmitters and phones, hand crank things, and non-network computers. And it's like, word I'm looking for is analog. Yeah, they had to go analog.
If I may, I mean, this part is so amazing, but it's also a giant problem. Okay, so first of all, the commander is Adama, played by Edward James Olmos from Miami Vice fame. But Adamu, Adam, I mean, duh.
Yeah.
Make a ton of breaks. But Adama was the one who refused to let the Galactica be wireless. And the Cylons were able to take the colonists by surprise, because the same beautiful version of the woman had seduced one of the main scientists in Caprica, which was like the capital planet, and basically hacked into the defense system. And so they basically shut it down, and so they were able to nuke everyone. Now, that's why Galactica was able to escape, because it wasn't part of the wireless, so they didn't know where it was. Here's the problem. The problem is, like Matt said, the Cylons were trying to annihilate the humans. Only later on did they say that they weren't, and they explained why. And it also has to do with 12. So apparently the skin jobs, that's what they called the human-looking Cylons, they only knew who some of them were. There were 5 missing versions. So there were also going to be 12 of them. And, we have 12, our day is broken up into 12 hours, 2 segments of 12 hours. We have 12 months. We have 12 constellations. There's really no particular reason for that. It just is one of those things that we do. I mean, even if you follow the procession of the constellations with the sun, there's actually 13 constellations, and we have 12 months because the Romans inserted 2 and things like that. But it's interesting where the 12 comes from. Maybe this is where the 12 comes from. However, they could have cured this so easily, because they had I'll just call them skin jobs, embedded in parts of the fleet. And there was a tech on the Galactica, and and they could have just at some point closed that plot loophole by saying, our source on the Galactica tells us that it's wireless, and we just need a few humans to survive. We can find the 5 in like a sample of 1% of the population, and they never closed that, even in the movie The Plan. So there was always this sort of gaping hole that, when you watch it week to week, I don't know that it's so obvious, but when, like, the second time I watched watched it on Peacock, and there's a lot of things that became very glaring. It really bugged me. Also, if Apollo ever did all the things he did in that sort of real time, like they would have shot him, like, I was supposed to keep forgiving father or not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think he was probably the character I liked the least on that show, even though he wasn't even the bad guy. Like, Baltar's character, I thought, was brilliantly executed by, I don't know the actor's name, but yeah, it's like, yeah, he is the villain in this, but yeah, whereas he was a over-the-top, cackling, big-eyed, big-haired evil guy in the original, it's like, no, in this one, he's weak. He's a genius. He's also a narcissist, and yeah, suffers from all the frailties of being human there. And so, yeah, that's why they picked him. That's why they used him.
He's sort of like Loki from Tom Hiddleston's Loki a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And and you're right. The Judeo-Christian themes, they tap into a lot of them, and they did it in a much more blatant way in the original, right? It's like the pilots wear those helmets that look like Egyptian headdresses. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, clearly we're going for a real Greco-Roman, but also Egyptian kind of themed thing. In this one, they're sort of going, it's like, yeah, we got the Egyptian, we got the Mesopotamian themes, and the biblical ones that come from that too. But we've got the classic gods, right? Yeah, these guys all they worship the lords of Kobol. I think there are 12 gods too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see. It's like, yeah, the Cylons have created this religion for themselves. They're robots who are religious fanatics. Oh, just genius. And
and some of them were more religious than others. There were some they didn't agree with each other. It was amazing.
Yes. And it was really cool to see. And I do know that at one point in the series, right? Part of the reason why they decided to stop hunting the Galactica, but then we're still pursuing it, is like, this is a very interesting psychological thing, and it really works with the whole idea of AI as our children, right? It's like basically the Cylons came back after 40 years because they figured we will never exist while the humans are there. Yeah, 40 years.
40 days, 40 years, 40 nights.
Yeah.
So much 40 in there as well.
That's like, why that amount of time there? Oh, we cannot know God's plan. God just seems to, I don't know, like certain numbers. So, yeah. You're going to spend 40 days in the desert looking for truth, and whereas you guys are going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And, yeah, so... Yeah, I very deliberately used the words like Exodus and Promised Land because, of course, it's like it. And that too, the way they said it, because this was something there that I thought there's a brilliance in this idea that, life here began out there, and and it's like, so are we looking at the future? Like human beings went out into space and colonized far, far away from Earth, or are we looking at the past here? Is this the foundations of all our ancient civilizations came from these guys, and it was no coincidence that these are who our gods were, and this is how our iconography worked, because, well, it's just like what they brought with them, right? The weird Egyptian helmets and the 12 lords of Kobol named after Greco-Roman gods, and so when they were saying it in the show, all of this has happened before and it'll happen again. I thought, oh, interesting. I wonder where they're going with this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they reveal at the end, it's like, this all happened in the past. So humans did come from the stars, and we're gearing up for another round of humans and their intelligent creations and them running amok, right? And that created sort of another frustrating, possibly brilliant point there. It's like, so this is, once again, we don't know what the reason is, but it's God's will, but we're literally talking about God now. You guys, you've owned that. The whole idea that I see angels, or this is some kind of divine plan unfolding. Yeah, they doubled down on that.
And of course, there was a prophecy, but the prophecy was the pagan prophecy, oracles, and it's interesting because because the decommissioning of the Galactica and opening the museum was important, but not that important. They had the Secretary of Education representing the government for that ceremony, and of course, she was the only survivor of the Holocaust, the nuclear attack. It was in the government. She was the highest ranking government official, so she became the president. So there was a lot of people saying, "Our president's now a school teacher. Is she good enough?" And there were her opponents, some better than others. Sometimes the admiral himself thinking the military should be in charge because really she wasn't, they didn't think she was capable of this. And she was also very devoutly religious. She was from the religious planet, I think Gemini, and was well known to some of the priestesses, which I think they called oracles. I don't remember exactly. And sometimes it seemed that they used maybe ayahuasca, peyote, or magic mist to help them with their visions. And it also turned out that the leader of the prophecy was going to die, like Moses. She was never supposed to reach the promised land, and it turns out that she had terminal breast cancer, or did she? Now, a couple of beautiful things. There was a doctor on the ship who was the guy who played Duke on Soap, so I love that very much. And he was a chain smoker, which was also fabulous. So people were very much flawed. They drank, they smoked, they gambled, they fought. But a couple of things where I'm going to get biblical, and I don't because early on, the ragtag fleet. So the Galactica survived with also a bunch of other ships that were sort of out there. Some were commercial ships, some were basically factories in space, mining ships. There probably, there was a diplomatic ship. There was what was now the equivalent of Air Force One. I think they call it Colony One. And they figured out very quickly that the Cylons were attacking every 33 minutes. Okay, so that's when they knew to time their jumps. Because there's something called FTL, which I guess was a hyperdrive. What did FTL stand for? Faster than light. And I think they did that right in a way, in that they didn't try to explain it, right? Yeah. It's like, it's a jump drive. That's all we're going to say. And you spool it up, and obviously it's a big deal to do it. Lots of energy required, but that episode was definitely one of my favorites. A real nail biter. It's like they're coming every 33 minutes. What does that mean? How are they tracking us? Is there somebody aboard? Yeah. Or Well, you clergy out there, you students of the Bible, Jesus was 33. You know that the 33rd parallel is out there. 33 is one of those numbers also that repeats. And I definitely don't think that was an accident in this show. So there was a lot of tension. Sometimes it wasn't sure they had enough power, and they could plot a course. So listen to Garden Views, the episode with Matt. It's called In Situ. I forgot the rest of the words, but there's only so many shows start with In Situ. In situ resource utilization. That's the name of the show, because I heard that word, that phrase. I'm like, that's the title of the show. Probably not the brightest idea, but whatever. But we mostly, Matt talks about how it is not possible at this point, or maybe only theoretically so, to go faster than light. But so we don't need to spend too much time on that. They figured it out for the purposes of the show. We're not that technical here or clinical. But I kept wondering, who's the Anunnaki? Who's the ancient aliens here? Is it the humans? Is it the Cylons? Is it their offspring? Because one of the obsessions with the show was joining the two races. And one of the characters named Boomer, but the real name is Sharon. The Boomer was her call sign, and all of the Cylon skin jobs, by the way, that they repeat. There's multiple copies of them, though I guess the missing 5, there weren't multiple copies, or there were far fewer, or they better hid themselves. So it seems that Sharon was the most attracted to and loving in a genuine way of humans, and apparently the most likely to get impregnated, because she was in relationships with a couple folks, and though it was technically different Sharons. We had the seductress, but she seemed to be more manipulative, but she seemed to love as part of, almost like a religious love, as part of God's plan. They were very clinical Cylons, and then there was one who started as very clinical, but they resurrect. So if the Cylons die, the skin jobs, there's a resurrection ship. And so they're basically downloaded, their consciousness, and it goes into another body of the same model on the resurrection ship, which is basically in a giant bubble bath of ooze. And they come out and they're confused. And sort of in between that, it's sort of like our in between when people have near-death experiences or died and come back. And in the in-between, one of the Cylons sort of saw God, had visions, and one of the clinical ones, like, she found God and became like as rapacious as any of them, and that was played by Lucy Lawless, Xena, a warrior princess, which was sort of a fabulous callback. I mean, the cast in this was so random and sort of excellent in its way. I'm going all over the place with the seasons. I agree with you that the first couple of seasons were terrific. The third season, I think, was the one that got really political. It was mostly anti-Iraq war stuff. And then the last season, I think they tied it up nicely, but it was a little bit of a mess. But I mean, there were some things that they like. So the technical stuff, like the thing with the water, never came back to it. It slowly morphed as I followed the story, that because the 7 human form Cylon skin jobs, I hate that term, but I guess it's the easiest one to use, realized that the only way they would find the other 5 was through the remaining humans. I guess the plan changed. So they never went after the water again. The humans ran out of food, but they figured out some way how to harvest algae to convert it into poor tasting food. That was a plot point for a couple of episodes. It was touch and go for a while before they found it, but after a while, no one seemed to complain about the food anymore. There were things like there was like an uprising on one of the labor ships where the colonial officers that were meant to quash it sort of joined in the labor revolt. So I mean, very real world conflict stuff. And the strange thing is that a lot of it touched on xenophobic racism, religious persecution, us against them, sort of make the colonists great again. There was I mean, really things that, now if someone wrote it now, it'd be like, no big deal. He just stole stuff from what's been going on. But this was before, 2014 through, present. And it's funny because Babylon 5, 10 years earlier, sort of explored some of the same subjects, which is it's a very different show, but they did explore a lot of the same subjects, in a slightly different way. But I think it's, it's probably time to turn it over to you to comment on those, because I feel like I gave a little bit of a speech there.
No problem. Yeah. Well, it is true. I mean, one of the things that I thought was really, really good about the early seasons, right? It's like they were doing the whole survival mode thing. And I mean, that's what makes like so many different types of, franchises really great. Like, it's like, what's the appeal of zombie fiction, right? Like with The Walking Dead and all that stuff. It's like, well, it's like they're picking up and they're trying to survive. And every day it's a new challenge. How are they going to deal with it, right? How are we going to secure food, water, fuel? And yeah, and how they're basically roughing it. And it's just, that's, people love that stuff. It's adventure. It's fun. It's, it's exciting. It's something you would never, ever want to experience, but boy, is it fun to think about, right? Post-apocalyptic stuff always, I don't know why that's so appealing, but it just is. And yeah, at a certain point, and it was definitely after the second half of season 2, I think that's when the decision was made. We want a long runtime with this, so we're going to start focusing inward. And yeah, all those stories were good. It's just, I kind of, looking back at it, there's a lot of those that I just skip when I'm binge watching, because it's like, oh, this is the one where they talk about their feelings, and Starbucks is getting really, really, really drunk because she's so scarred at this point. And it's like, nope, skip that part. It's like, okay, yes, now they're talking about dealing with Scar, the Cylon fighter ace. Let's get more of that in there. But yeah, when they started sort of connecting it all together there, I was very intrigued, because I really wanted to see how that all ended, because so much was explored in that show, and in a way that was in a way that was not sanitary, right? It's one of the things I loved about Babylon 5 too, right? It's like Star Trek, which, undeniable quality there. I mean, it was long, the Next Generation is something that did coincide with a lot of my formative years, and it helped shape what I love about science fiction. But yeah, I remember sort of concluding at one point, it's like, this show is something that if I ever start doing sci-fi, it's an example of what not to do.
Right. There were no problems. And no one worried about money. No one worried about food. No one worried about gravity.
yeah, and everything's fixed by the end. It's like they always manage to pull it out, and everybody's happy at the end. Everything's, and that is actually something that you could grow to like about that show. It's like, every episode is nice and self-contained. But what I loved about Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica, the reboots, was they had grittiness, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, we're going to look at this in a very in a kind of stark way, and not necessarily a rated R kind of way there, but there will be violence, blood, and guts, and situations that will make you uncomfortable. They'll push you to the edge of your seat, and nothing is ever all wrapped up in a nice little bow by the end, right? There's always the next thing. There's always the next challenge. And, we managed to resolve one thing here, but, it's like the happy moment doesn't necessarily last. It's like...
And I think it's probably overdue, but I'm not sure that we really said too much, but folks, there will be spoilers in this show. I don't consider a spoiler for a series that ended 15 years ago. Exactly. But if you're looking, there will be spoilers. It's amazing because none of the characters were truly flawless. I mean, they weren't even consistent, which, by the way, is sort of real. That's a lot like real humanity, especially under pressure. The president had to make decisions that were against her, more progressive leanings. The admiral, who was on the opposite, sometimes had to make more progressive decisions. The fighters, though, would fluctuate sometimes. Really, Hilo seemed to be the only one that was consistent, but he consistently made, bad choices strategically, but he was the only one who seemed to have a moral center. But that didn't really seem to matter in the show, except that he was the biological father of an offspring with one of the Sharons, who they named Hera. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that what happened is that the skin jobs originally were created in hopes that they could procreate themselves, because creating life would make you as close to God as possible, and they couldn't. So they were like the Anunnaki. They couldn't procreate with each other, or they were like the Agigi, or whoever the Anunnaki created first. They couldn't procreate with they couldn't have offspring. They were like mules. But it turns out that the skin jobs could procreate with humans. And Hera, right around the same time, I sort of learned about mitochondrial Eve, which I know is not as certain as it was at the time. Maybe is it? But I'm like, so is Hera our mitochondrial Eve?
And I think I remember in the last episode, they were speculating on that, right? It's like they show Hera and Hilo and Sharon walking along, and they're swinging her, and then suddenly it's like, we cut to 10,000 years later, basically implying that these guys showed up in the late Paleolithic era, right, when humans were started making the transitions from hunting and gathering to agriculture and settle the things. And I could be off on the years. Whatever.
You are. It was 150,000 years later.
Oh, so yes. So they landed right when, humanity was in the early Paleolithic. And so, basically, about the point there where where our records show that, they were up there moving, they were migrating, they were doing all the stuff there. And there was a news story.
It wasn't clear where it was, but I mean, the inference was probably on the Serengeti. But I mean, I guess it could have been. But it was hunter-gatherers. They were, sort of long, stringy hair. They had some makeup and hair ornaments, loincloths mostly, spears. They were dark, but ethnically ambiguous. So, obviously they didn't want to tell us for sure where they were. And by the way, the Earth that they ended up on, another spoiler, wasn't really the Earth. It's just they ended up calling it Earth because they found the actual Earth. I'm not going to spoil that just yet. We'll get to it.
But right when they do the jump ahead there, I remember it's like there's a news story on about ancient remains that have been found. Could this be the primordial Eve? And I did feel they were strongly suggesting that was Hera's, her dead body there from 150,000 years prior. And of course,
At the same time, also they showed like a little Cylon, like one of those monkeys banging cymbals. They had like a little Cylon battery operator toy banging its cymbals. That looked like the old-fashioned in like the window of a toy store in a city that was probably New York or Vancouver or Toronto or Sydney. So sort of that was the inference. What everything has happened before and will happen again. Yeah, which is interesting because on Garden Views we talked about that theory that there was a universe before this one, and which means that maybe there's an infinity. It's a hall of mirrors, that there's infinity of universes. So if everything is infinite, I guess everything repeats over and over again one way or another. I mean, I think the inference here was more lineal, that the universe repeats itself the same way every time, but that's not particularly important either way. Repeat is repeat. So there were some characters in here. It's funny because some of the most flawed characters turned out to be the most avid freedom fighters, but were also part of the Five. And then there were some other characters that were flawed, and we're not quite sure what they become, or at least I'm not. So I'm going to move away from the Five for a moment and ask you about Starbuck for one, incorporeal Caprica, and incorporeal Gaius Baltar. Were they angels? Was she always an angel?
I don't know, and it really didn't make sense when they did that there. I mean, but yeah, that was the fan reaction. It's like a lot of fans dropped off from that point. They still watched, I'm sure, but they were unimpressed with that. It's like, okay, yeah, because they did basically confirm that, both Gaius Baltar and Caprica 6, they were seeing angels, and they were representations of the other. I initially, that was a really cool mystery too, and a friend of mine commented on that. It's like, oh, that's amazing, right? It's like they either have a shared mental illness going on where they're somehow connected to each other, but the fact that it cut both ways with them was cool. And then Starbuck, they basically confirmed that she too was an immortal being of some kind, and she came back for a special purpose. And boy, it is.
It's very Old Testament, because I didn't know what it was at the time. Because it's very clear she died in an episode. She died in like this thick atmosphere. Her ship exploded. She had done something heroic. She had already found like the arrow of Cobalt or the arrow of Artemis, which was supposed to part of the prophecy. She was held hostage for a while with one of the Cylons who was sort of her rapist, seductress, temptress, knew her better. She hated him. She loved him. It's not entirely clear. Psychological warfare, not exactly clear. She was painting pictures of images of Nebula that later on became important. But at some point, it was clear she died, and then she came back as the messenger. So I decided at the time, I was confused just like everyone else and just went along with Angel. Of course, at the end of the series, she just disappeared. Apollo turned her and she was gone. I think that maybe she was like an Enoch character, an Enochian character where, God had her ascend, brought her back to do a mission. Enoch came back from time to time. It's not depending on which book you believe. But then he disappeared forever and walked with God. I just think that they prolonged that's how I reconcile it anyway. She was like an Enochian figure.
And it did seem that they were committing to that. That's kind of what I found interesting about just those last few episodes, right? It's like, oh, everything's just so tense and and it's like, whoa, hang on. So Baltar's saying he sees angels and they're beyond good and evil. And it's like, okay, so we're going with angels. Okay. And when Starbuck...
Like they could have been, like she could have downloaded his consciousness. The only question is where was it stored? What cloud was it stored in for those 150,000 years? Because the colonists, for whatever reasons, decided to get rid of all technology when they got there, which is sort of stupid. And it sort of ruined the Atlantean myth of it that these ancient aliens would but I just decided that some of the colonists cheated, that some of them kept some things and
they must have too. Yeah, it's like we're gonna wander off into the wilderness and what? It's like Gaius is talking about farming. He actually knows a bit about farming. Yeah, sure, he grew up on a farm, but you're on a distant planet. You don't know if you can eat any of the crops you could grow, and I did see some funny satire work there that said, they were, they all died. Like within a year, they were all dead because, what were they thinking?
Right. And it's like, we'll keep the non-technological tools, but I don't remember seeing any plows, or major shovels. They might have had those like spade, like, Marines keep those like sort of hand shovels. But the things you need to farm and cut down trees and stuff. So I'm thinking a bunch of them cheated, and so So I'm going to go with Gaius and Caprica or Six were sort of continuing AI who probably thought they were angels, which again, marries my idea that technology and religion at some point are one and the same. Anyway.
Well, that's good, and I imagine that's probably better than what the writers actually were doing there. I kind of got the impression, it's like we're just, the show's coming to an end. We're trying to just wrap everything up. We got real deep and meta now. How the hell do we ground that? It's like we don't. Just say it's angels and move on.
But the only but to that, and maybe you can help me independently, or if you adopt my theory or something close enough. Kara's father playing the piano, the piano which ended up being a code and turned into a map. That whole episode, which was sort of creepy, was her father also an angel? Was it just a vision that she had? Was it a memory? Because once she became closer to divine, she could call upon certain things involuntarily and connect with Hera, because Hera was drawing the same notes, which became I think it was like a star. I think you were basically following like the Seven Sisters or something. I don't know. But what was it with Kara's father?
Well, I remember he died when she was young.
Right.
And she grew up with an alcoholic, abusive mother who always told her, Kara, you're special. You're meant for better things, and get over here. I'm going to smack you around for misbehaving and what have you. And so, I mean, right there, too, there it does seem like there is some deeper religious element there. Oh, dear. A thought occurs. That maybe her father was an angel and got called home and he impregnated her mother, who was mortal. I mean, that's a very classical motif too, right? The gods always in the Greco-Roman pantheon there, they were always having sex with mortals just cause, and producing semi-divine offspring. And
there we go. The demigods are Nephilim. They're perfect. Excellent. The heroes, the great men of renown. I mean, if you were a colonial warrior in 150,000 BC, even if you didn't cheat, if you knew, martial arts and kept, some semblance of a weapon or tactical strategies, you probably would look like you probably win most of your wars just with tactics. But okay, I like it. Now, the Cylons also had these things called hybrids, and they were sort of oracles who they controlled the Cylons FTLs. They looked sort of like humans, but failed humans. They were wired into the ships, and they spoke in basically gibberish, and it looked like they were always in pain. My interpretation of them, aside from finding them disturbing, was that they were failed or incomplete offspring efforts originally when they were trying to make skin jobs procreate. The few that survived had these sort of capacities but couldn't survive independently, and they were like You know, in the old Anunnaki story, of course, they experimented, you know, and created all sorts of monsters. Or, you know, if you believe in, you know, some of the old biblical canons, Lilith, you know, abandoned humanity and started sprouting monsters all over the place. I'm thinking that like these Cylon hybrids might have been that version in this story of that equivalent.
Well, yeah, no, that is a good theory, because it I did think when seeing them, it's like it's like something went wrong here, didn't it? And they like went nuts, but genius and revelation are like such a fine line. So while they can no longer function in normal society, their brains are able to plot jumps and, you know, see through space and time in order to do that. And so, yeah, they're kind of like the navigators from Dune, but without all the drugs, right? They're
absolutely
they just they have this natural ability, and the way that he was Kara's lover, he was one of the final five, and he got hit by a bullet, and he started going down that road. He started losing it and becoming a hybrid. Basically, it's like, oh, cool. So basically, the other hybrids, they're brain damaged too, but it makes them, it causes them to sort of lose
functionality.
But
it released other abilities, I guess, in their programming or in whatever their divine nature is, or again, maybe it's the same thing. One of the big problems I had is at some point we learned that Cavill, who was played by Dean Stockwell, who was sort of like the Machiavellian, you know, the bad guy, Cylon skin job. He seemed to be the leader. He wasn't exactly the leader, but he was the hard ass. Apparently he knew who the five were, and he hid it from the rest of them. And there seemed to be no reason for that in the plot ever. And it seems like the only motive for that is that he didn't want them ever to find the five. So why keep the humans alive?
It was very personal for him. I remember he felt like their whole, because the five were the ones that gifted them the ability to create themselves in the flesh, right? And he was horribly disappointed in that, and he was also very, very bitter about humanity's treatment of his ancestors, right? His earlier ones. So apparently he did it because he was upset, and they didn't really explain what exactly. Well, what was the breaking point here? Okay, you woke up in your flesh suit. You thought, well, this is a betrayal of my robothood, my robot heritage. So, you boxed up the five and shoved them off, left them among the humans. It is.
I mean, for a schemer,
something they could have explained better.
He could have unquestionably been in charge, or at least shared power with the Lucy Lawless version in eternity if they just killed all the humans in the beginning when they could have. I mean, it's like he caused his own doom. Maybe he was the sin of hubris. I don't know. That's very Greek tragedy. I don't know. So Adama, he was like he was less of an Adam, even though the name is appropriate. He got them there, but he was more of a Moses, but he was more, it seemed like the implication that Lee Adama, who was Admiral Adama's son, surviving son, they lost their older son, the more competent son, I think a year before the accident, and actually that son was engaged to Kara Thrace Starbuck. So there's always that sort of tension, especially when they went back to like a pre-marriage party where Lee first met Kara and they both got drunk. The brother went to sleep and Karen Lee almost, cheated for the nuptials. They didn't. And that's a repeating thing for Lee. He like almost cheats a couple times. He gets married to, what was her name? Duala?
Yeah.
Which is interesting because she was an interesting character. I didn't really care for her that much. Like sometimes she was really strong. Sometimes she was exactly the opposite. She killed herself at a very strange point. She just gave up. But also like Duala, I guess Dual, And then there's also Duaddle in the Book of Enoch, which is like where you trap a certain revolutionary archangels. I don't know if I'm reading more into names or they just pick names at some point. I don't know, but this isn't where I want to go with this. But the implication was that Lee was absolutely definitely going to settle down with someone, and he was going to have the first child on New Earth, human child, not hybrid child, because Hera was already there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on Lee? Because he was positioned as the hero, but he sort of sucked.
Yeah. Well, I think they did a very good job of capturing his obvious daddy issues. I kind of felt like, well, what you said earlier is absolutely correct. It's like, why is he not dead? Why have they not shot him for treason? He's committed treason a couple times.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, he's committed arrestable offenses. You can't disobey orders in the military, or, I gave you an order to do, well, I went and did the opposite. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you're done. Your commission's done, right? The whole boss's son thing too. But yeah, if the mythology, they did bring this up at a few points there. Tom Sarek, played by the original Apollo. What was the actor's name?
Richard Hatch.
Yeah. Oh, and he did such a good job in his character, but he always likened Adama to Zeus, and therefore Apollo. And it's like, oh, your call sign's perfect. You are the son of Zeus. You are the archer and the hero god. So I'm wondering if there's something in the mythology there that indicates that, because I mean, in Greek mythology, daddy
I don't
issues.
remember Apollo being that much of a problem for Zeus. Zeus was more of a problem for everyone else.
Yeah.
It was odd because it never seemed that Lee Apollo wanted the job he had. He was he wanted to be the CAG. He got to be the CAG. Then he wanted to work for the president. Then he didn't want. Then he wanted to work for the president's opposition. Then he wanted to be a lawyer. It's like whatever the contrary position was, he always convinced himself that he was right. But he would, always do the wrong thing, except when it came to something carnal. Then he couldn't quite bring himself to cheat. But let's face it, he came close enough that any significant other would have been mad at him forever about it. So it was just a weird character, but it's like he was constantly betraying his father, either overtly with firearms or spiritually, except in that one thing where he was part of the defense for Baltar, which his father seemingly disapproved, but actually in his heart of hearts was proud of him, because Adama's father was like a very famous lawyer. Like he wrote like the criminal law handbook. And that was a big thing. They still use books. He had a vast library. He was always reading, which was similar to a Star Trek episode where they had a lawyer. I think it was even Red Skeltons or Red Buttons who played it. And he said, I use books, when Captain Kirk needed a lawyer against Captain Pike. I see you look perplexed. You don't remember that from the original series?
No. I do know the episode you're referring to. I just don't remember that part of it.
I'll never forget it. He goes, I still use books. Maybe because I love the movie, the Last Day of the World War II Jingo movie, and it was the same actor. So, and maybe that's when I decided to be a lawyer. I don't know. So there were a lot of out-of-body experiences, dreams, Akashic field meditations, a lot of things that considered spiritualism here in different places. We talked about the hybrids. We talked about the oracles. We talked about there were prophetic dreams, especially when the president was taking certain drugs to dull the pain for cancer. So she would be influenced, which some questioned her judgment. That led to certain dramas. Turns out that they were usually right or harbinging of something. She shared dreams with some of the Cylons, especially the skin jobs, usually tied to Hera. There was just the visions by Starbuck. I think they weren't all post when she at least obviously became an angel, but maybe she always was. It was just a lot of out-of-body experiences. The whole thing with Gaius Balter and Six/Caprica, the smoke show blonde. It was just a lot of sort of spiritual mysticism in there from a lot of different angles, loosely tied together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, from a literary standpoint, dreaming, hallucinogenic states, visions, these all do. They do tie together. It's like, how are they distinguishable from like a transcendent state? Like, well, we don't know, frankly. Yeah, could be they're all forms of hallucination. Could be they're all forms of revelation. But yeah, I did like the way they did that, and I really liked how they kept it ambiguous. So when they kind of committed to the whole angel thing, it was like, well, but you can draw your own conclusions, right? It's like, oh, they're just saying that. That's not like necessarily what's going on here, right? We can infer other things.
Right. And the Cylons were interesting because the Cylons were monotheistic, as we said. The Cylons wanted to become human, but they had a clear caste system. I mean, you had the skin jobs who were clearly in charge. You had Centurions. You had lesser generation Centurions. You had the Raiders, which I think they described like they're not machines, but they're like horses. They're, you have to treat them nice, but they thought, but only so much, So there's definitely a caste system, but they were also the slaves who rebelled and kept evolving, where the humans, I mean, they didn't quite have caste systems. They just had a typical class system, but they were the pagans. And yeah, they did build slaves who became sentient. It's not exactly clear if they became sentient and were still kept slaves or if it was a giant surprise, but yeah. I guess the question is, who were the bad guys, or were there any good guys?
Yeah, that is a good question there. And if you're trying to keep it complicated and nuanced, right? It's like, yeah, the heroes have flaws. The heroes will make mistakes. The heroes will question if they're on the right side. And yeah, the antagonists, well, yeah, once you get into their motives and all that stuff, it's like, well, okay, we can agree that they're doing something bad here, but they do have their reasons. And if they, if those reasons turn out to be justifiable enough, or if they decide that we're going to switch things up and try something different here now, yeah, are they the bad guys anymore? And so, yeah, it kind of was like in the end, they did sort of establish in the end that the Dean Stockwell's guy, right? He was the antagonist for sure. He had his reasons, but whereas some Cylons wanted to live a mortal life and live in peace with humans, he was like, absolutely not. No. Right. It's this was we set out on a policy of eliminating them, and eliminate them we shall. And I don't care about but yeah, the way he didn't care about the final five, but then as we learn, it's like, oh, he's known all along. He's the only one of you who knew, and this is why he kept it a secret. And not entirely clear, but yeah.
I mean, he seemed to want the Cylons to continue to live forever, and they had the resurrection technology, which seemed to only be needed for the skin jobs. It didn't seem to be needed for the Centurions or the other more robotic forms. I'm not really sure why the Cavil Cylons wanted Hera then, because who cares? It didn't affect his ability unless he thought that they would take over, push him out. And I mean, he couldn't have known that one segment of the skin job Cylons would want to live mortal lives, and that the Centurion Cylons and the lesser Centurions and the Raiders and the other ships that have some sort of conscious wanted to be free in and of their own. I mean, that was sort of the end. It was a little trite, actually. But, I mean, there's no way he could have known any of that stuff would happen. And again, I keep coming back to, like, why did he make issues of things? There weren't issues. And if he just wanted to keep the damn secret and stay immortal, he just could have killed the humans, from the get-go, and nothing would have changed. He just would have lived happily forever. being immortal, and those who wanted to pray to a god could have prayed to a god, unless somehow he was like the devil and knew that God would free everyone, but to be free you had to be mortal. I mean, which is I'm reaching right now to try to make it make sense.
Yeah, well, and this is what happens when you've got a show running for many seasons, and they've got a lot of complex things going on there. Because I know the cast, even the cast, was a little confused about what all had happened and where things were going, and that is why they made the plan and some other things. They're trying to basically fill in the gaps and answer people's questions. But yeah, I do think they ended up creating more questions than they could answer.
Yeah.
And by the time it's like, oh, we got to wrap everything up now. It's like, oh, okay, well, we'll do our best.
The movie, The Plan, A, it wasn't all that entertaining. B, it didn't really solve things. I mean, it did answer some questions. It did fill in some gaps, but it created others, which is what I would call an unsuccessful project.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of concepts that are less spiritual, but well, maybe not. But music was a repetitive theme. Music was the path. We are told, or I have been told, that there's 2 universal languages, math and music. So, I wonder if that had anything to do with it, or they just like the device of music because it's a visual and audio experience, and music is easier to convey on TV to a viewer than, math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I do remember actually Kara, when they are visiting her old apartment and they see her mural, which, as it turns out, it's like, oh, that's very significant. It's going to come up. Yeah. And she's putting on music in the background, and they're sort of listening to that while she's just talking about life choices and all that. And yeah, I believe in her flashbacks too, where she's sort of coming to terms with her destiny, that her mother played the piano, or that she did. Yeah. And
as Kara was reliving the music, she was somehow communicating it, or Hero was picking up on it, and she drew the map, which it took a while for her parents, one Cylon, one human, to figure out that this was actually, it wasn't musical notes, it was a map, and then that's what led them to Earth. Okay, so here is the spoiler at the at not quite the very end, but the penultimate end, and they find Earth. First of all, they follow the prophecy. They follow the path. It's a little bit convoluted, but they get to Kobol. They find temples. They find the Kobol, the vaunted opera house. There's visions. They find another survivable planet. They call it New Caprica. The Cylons, of course, predictably find them and take it over. And then they have sort of like an occupation insurrection. It got very, Iraq War thing. If you were alive during the Iraq War and you were, probably 16 or above, depending on your politics, you either really, really agree with it, or you really, really found it offensive, or you were just like, dude, I don't want this in my science fiction show. It's like too much. You're losing the thread here. I don't remember which I was, but when I saw it again, I was like, this is not necessarily helpful, but it's, but some of it was interesting, but I don't know. It wasn't a very attractive season. So anyway, they go from New Caprica. They find I think it was the nebula, the Lion Nebula. So I guess it was Leo, a constellation Leo. And that, and this was all with the guidance of Kara and the music. And from there, they followed a star system to Earth. And they found Earth. And on Earth, it tied back to some visions that some of the 5 were having. And here's the answers I recall it. There was a 13th tribe. There was a 13th colony. It was the skin job Cylons. They were living with the humans at some point in time. So obviously there was a slave class that rebelled, but there were already skin jobs there, but they left. So at some point, the other 12 colonies either hit it or forgot the ancestral memory that they had made skin jobs who left the 13th colony, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense given the technology seemed to be, very close. And it was very clear that the Battlestar Galactica old generation was behind the Battlestar Pegasus, because of course there was a Pegasus that came out and that had its own conflicts, so I'm not sure it was particularly important to our recap. But it was still compatible. Like it was next generation or 2 generations, but it's not like the Battlestar Galactica was not, it wasn't obsolete. It still had capability. Anyway, so they got to the Earth. Turns out that the skin job Cylons were the 13th colonists. They were the ones who forged the path, found Earth. Apparently, they couldn't even make peace with themselves, just like the 12 skin jobs. They had a nuclear war and destroyed themselves. So when they got to Earth, everyone was dead. The implication was it was all Cylon skin jobs. I guess different versions of the 12, all dead. Maybe that was why Cavill was trying to hide it all. Maybe he was like Dr. Zaius, who we've always known, but you can't handle the truth, kind of thing. We knew what was in the Forbidden Zone. So maybe Cavill was Dr. Zaius there. I like Dr. Zaius. Even as a kid, I was always sort of for the bad guys. And he really wasn't the bad guy. I mean, I understand this position. I'm digressing. So from there, I forget exactly how they found it, but they found another habitable planet, which turned out to be New Earth or / Earth. So there's your spoiler. And maybe that's the thing that made sense, but they never really spelled it out, which would be one thing if it was like a book by William Gibson where he never spells anything out. But for a TV show, if that was the answer, I'm not sure if I'm retrofitting it or if that was their intention. Did I do an okay job with that? And do you have anything to add to that?
I think you did a pretty good job there. Yeah. It just, for me, it always comes back to, well, hard to, it's really impossible to tell what the writers were thinking at that point. They were trying to wrap things up and get them to where they were going. And I never quite understood how, the musical notes, how that played out there. But yeah, the fact that the 13th
I do, because when you did the musical notes on the bars and they laid it over a star map, it matched exactly a pattern that was before them. And I guess Kara recognized it or somebody did.
Yeah, but just like where that came from, it was like, well, we're angels, we know things. And it's like, okay, sure. Okay. But and it's like, well, yeah. So the prophecy was true after all. There was another place, and it's populated with their Really interesting. Okay, yeah.
But their prophecy was a planet that was populated with skin job Cylons.
Yes. It's like yes, there was a 13th tribe, and they did go to a place called Earth, but they ruined it too. So this was not our salvation, and we're but we still managed to find our way to Earth, quote unquote, right?
Now, was it ever made clear or addressed at all whether or not on Earth that was destroyed Earth, whether or not those were just the 12 skin job models, or if they had human Cylon hybrids there also? Because I thought it was only the 12 Cylons.
Yeah. Well, if I remember right, okay. They're digging on New Caprica to try and figure out what happened, and they found Centurion appendages there, and there was no indication, to the best of my knowledge, that they had ever that they had done that there. That they had the Cylons that had gone there had evolved quicker, according to the explanation. It was because they didn't have FTL, because they had to do long, slow trips through space. Their technology evolved faster. I don't get that at all, but whatever, fine. You develop the technology to create your flesh and blood type bodies sooner than others did, so okay. And that's what separated them from their metal chassis brethren. It was like, we got the superior synthetic flesh and blood model, and then those guys, and they basically turned on us the same way they did the similar Centurions did against their human masters in the 12 colonies. And
I don't remember any, in the flashbacks or visions, like when Chief Terrell saw himself at the at the bodega, the open market, like the farmer's market, shopping for food, and we saw Colonel Ty and what was this one, Ellen, who was also a little pretty diabolical and when they were there enjoying like a picnic in the park. I don't remember ever hearing children or seeing any parents holding little children's hands. I don't. I mean, the reason why I'm focusing on this is because I'm wondering if Cavill's motivation was that he wanted Hera so much because he never wanted them to know that they could successfully procreate, because it was the act of that procreation with humans that led to the Cylons to fall. That love opened up the devotion to God, the proof of godliness, but also the sin that led them to kill themselves. But I don't think that was the case, and also wouldn't make any sense because 6 was about as devout as you got beforehand, and their procreation, the hybrids, the Nephilim, the demigods, whatever you want to call them, the offspring of Cylon and human, was just a theory. They hadn't done it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, they were trying, and they figured they were failing because they lacked love. And yeah, they didn't see no Cylon babies there on Earth or anywhere. They're clearly not being born or decanted or what. They come out of the goo like fully grown assembly specs. Yeah.
Right. It just took them a few moments to get their bearings for their systems to sort of reboot, and then to remember what happened and remember that they weren't dying, they were actually living.
Yeah.
All right. My last planned question for you, and believe it's nothing big at all, but did God exist, or was God the result of Cylon and human Congress? See, nothing big there at all.
Yeah. Well, again, they seem to commit to that idea that God was real. The Cylons' religion is correct, basically, and he's the one sending the angels and all that stuff. So they clearly they knew something that the humans didn't. And I guess, I kind of took that at face value because they did something very similar in Caprica. Did you watch that show? Caprica?
I watched the first few episodes, and
I
really felt like I was going to get lung cancer watching it.
Yeah. Oh, and it was hard to take. It was also gritty and so forth there. But what they showed in the last episode, and they once again, they were wrapping things up quick because I think they had just discovered they weren't going to be renewed. So they started doing a sort of a montage style thing where they show how the Cylons got radicalized pretty quickly. And it's like, okay, so the monotheists who were there on Caprica, it was their religion that the Cylons adopted, but it apparently was an angel who looked just like the young woman in it there who becomes like the soul inside the Cylon machine. She was there directing things. She was trying to get that girl and her father to create this new race of machines and so that they would then be radicalized by this religion and rise up. So it's like, so the whole angel and God's messenger thing was going on in the prequel story too. And it was, it was as if whoever this being is, apparently he doesn't like being called God. That's what they said in the last thing. He's committing them to this path again, where we always end up creating things that destroy us. And then, I don't know, the lesson is we need to accomplish some kind of union between the two of us so that we can do it all over again.
But like the Dark Tower, the end was open-ended, and maybe this time it was going to be different.
Yeah. But and I found that rather frustrating ending there, but that does seem very biblical. It's like, what is the rhyme or reason to all this? Why do we keep having to go through all this suffering and so forth and nuance? Well, ours is not to know why. It's like,
I mean, it was almost like, if you took all the books of Enoch and then you took the Bible up until Exodus and then maybe a little bit more, or you gave it a different ending. It was sort of like a version of that. It was almost like a version of that. I mean, I bet they were. Listen, I don't know the Old Testament that well, but it sounds like I do. But I only know the fun stuff. I only know angels and demons and fighting and stuff. But I'm sure if we we could find a Job. We could probably find a lot. We could, there was definitely idolatry. There was the false, or was it a false cult that worshipped Gaius for a while? And all that other stuff. So I'm sure if we got like a learned panel of clergy who were also sci-fi geeks, and they're out there. They could probably do a great job with this. I feel like I dominated most of this and sort of steered it in my directions, which was more towards the biblical and the woo-woo and the spiritual. And that doesn't mean that's the only interpretation or why somebody was a fan or would still want to talk about it. So were there any aspects that, are on your mind that you'd like to discuss that have nothing to do or only tangentially related to the stuff I brought up?
Not really. I mean, one thing that I did very much like about the show for the longest time, its grittiness and its commitment to let's do this in a way that seems realistic. I mean, even if we are dealing with some highfalutin technology ideas, I respected how they did that. It's like, don't try to explain it, for the love of God. If you do that, the nerds will just pick it apart. And also, how that it worked into a very fun action series. I mean, my wife and I have watched the introductory miniseries, right? The 2-part intro to the whole thing, and thought, oh, that's great. It's disaster movie porn, basically. It does it so well. And and in a way, I mean, the space battles I thought were always just awesome. And and how they're doing it without laser beams and photon torpedoes. It actually looks like old-timey battleships are shooting at each other.
They were using bullets. They were using carbon-based or metal-based bullets and projectiles and nukes. And they had shields, and the ship was not invulnerable. And at the end, as needed to be, the old girl, the Battlestar Gallactica was scuttled. It served its final mission just barely. Also, one of the best parts about the New Caprica season was when they finally did the rescue to get the people back, and the whole thing about how Galacta wasn't supposed to go into low orbit or into the atmosphere, and how that buckled the ship, and it was like, it seemed like it was going to be pulled apart. That was cool. It almost made that season worth it. But, I would highly recommend the show. I just would tell people, don't binge watch it. Maybe watch one episode every 3 days, something like that. So, maybe watch 2 episodes at a time. But if you watch 4 or 5, the week, there's a big difference between shows that are designed to be streamed and shows that were designed to be watched week by week. And this is definitely one of the latter. So I wouldn't binge it until you've watched the show something close to, with a few days between it. And then if you love it and you want to binge it at that point because you just want to see it again, fine. But the first time I wouldn't, just because it becomes too glaring. Like, why would anyone put up with Apollo? Or, or WTF Ty, or why is Chief Terrell such a loser? And Hilo, stop doing that. At some point a Marine's going to shoot you. But definitely a great reimagining, maybe one of the best reboots of all time.
Oh definitely, and I shudder to think, but I think some fans out there probably want to see a reboot of the reboot and say, and be like, this time can we just drop the angels thing? And it's just, but no, don't do this, don't mess with it. Right? It's like it was as good as it could be as a reboot wise, and remaking it will ruin everything that was good about it. If you don't like what they did in some of the latter seasons, just cut yourself off. Stop it. Whatever episode,
it would be a much shorter story if they didn't go in all the different directions. So I'm with you. I don't think there should be a reboot, as much as I'd like to envision one where either they answered all the questions and laid all the way into the spiritual stuff, or got rid of that entirely, one or the other, and explain it. But that's not what would happen.
Yeah,
it would just be its own gobbledygook.
Yeah,
The Expanse.
The Expanse.
Yeah, the Expanse, which is not like Battlestar Galactica really in many ways, but I think when the Expanse came out, it satisfied my appetite for gritty, real science-based, even more so, like Game of Thrones geopolitical drama set in space. And the Expanse, I think, is, I've only seen 3 seasons of it, but I thought seasons 2 and 3 were amazing. Season 1 was a little bit rough, but it was absolutely necessary to build the rest. So I understand why in hindsight. So, and I've heard that the other seasons on Amazon continue to be excellent. I just don't have Amazon.
Well, I can tell you, I have seen them, and they are very good. And it's very interesting that you're making this comparison, because the way that I was sold on the show, I remember the previews were coming out somewhere in 2015 or so. They'd shown the preview at Comic-Con, and the tagline was, "This is the show fans of Battlestar Galactica have been waiting for," right? Because nothing else has filled that niche since it went off the air. And I heard that, I thought, oh, good, yeah, I got to watch this. And well,
I feel like that's coming.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have a complicated relationship with The Expanse. Basically, I was writing the manuscript for my first book when I started watching the first episode, and the description they gave sounded an awful lot like what I was writing. And I was just like, oh, crap. And nearly quit. But I remembered that the same thing happened to William Gibson, right? He was writing Neuromancer. He went out to see the movie Blade Runner, and he had his oh crap moment, because it's like, oh, look at that noir cityscape and all this stuff. That's the setting of his book there. Not Los Angeles, but the same look and feel. So he thought, there's no way I'm going to top that. Ridley Scott did it. He masterfully, and he very nearly threw out the manuscript. But then he finished it, and it's one of the most influential science fiction books, certainly cyberpunk books ever written. And it's like, good thing he didn't, nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think The Matrix probably drove him a little bit crazy too, but that was much later.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that Spook Country and Zero History are excellent books. They're not science fiction, but they're not exactly anything. They're not spy books. They're not they're not science fiction, but they're not any of those things. So if you like reading sort of a heavy book that you have to think about, I strongly recommend Spook Country. And if you like it or love it, then Zero History is a sequel. There's another one, Peripheral, which I haven't gotten around to reading yet. But it's not an audiobook. You must read it. It's not an audiobook.
Yeah.
So having now reconciled yourself or having peace with The Expanse, that it has not stolen your idea, that even though part of the very foundation of the premise is similar, but the story goes in a very different way, is your relationship now with The Expanse better? Does it satisfy your Battlestar Galactica itch, or just doesn't have the same effect on you as me?
Oh yeah, no, it totally did. And I'm glad that I, well, for one, kept writing and kept watching, because it actually did show that stories can have similar settings or ideas and be very different. And if somebody got there before you and wrote something that was really, really good, you got to give them respect for that. It's like, anytime you come up with an idea, you're not planting a flag. Chances are a lot of people have been there before you. And
The Man with No Name, The Equalizer, The A-Team, Jack Reacher, The Hulk.
And the show. I have yet to read the books, but I want to at some point there. But I've seen all the I believe all the seasons, but the last one there, and it really is a very good show. And it's a perfect example of the kind of science fiction I grew up, wanting to write, based on the inspired the inspiring examples, it's sits in perfect contrast to what I wanted to avoid, which was the happy utopian stuff. It's like, yeah, humans going to space is not going to solve our problems. It's going to solve certain issues. It's going to help with some, but we're still going to find ways to screw up and treat each other terribly and, generally just be awful. And
my Garden View series on the emerging laws, policies, and whatever you want to call it, the future of space, which you were on one show and you'll probably be on others. Before I move on to other stuff, has your book been written yet, or are you still writing it?
Oh no, 3 books have been written. I'm working on.
What are the titles?
Well, the first one's called The Cronian Incident, and that refers to Cronian means having to do with Saturn, right? Saturn is the Roman name for Kronos, and so so basically an incident happens on one of its moons and is being looked into, and of course, through revealing a deep plot. That is actually a similarity between my work in The Expanse, which was the detective, right, or the detective story in it. But that is a very universal thing I found. The idea that yes, something bad happens, now we need to look into it, and that reveals this whole thing, this whole conspiracy or whatnot. Or something that's going on here. And the second one is called the Jovian Manifesto. Jovian has to do with Jupiter's moons. It's like people in response to the events in book 1, there's a manifesto released, and it's got everybody on edge because of what it reveals. And the last one was called the Frost.
So it should be confused with the Jovial Manifesto, which is when Santa Claus goes psychopathic and becomes Krampus.
Never heard of that.
I just made it up.
Did you? Because I want to write that. That sounds hilarious. And
I give you my permission.
Okay. The last book is called The Frost Line Fracture. The frost line refers to the boundary that's right about where the asteroid belt falls. And it's like beyond that, the temperature drops substantially in the solar system. So you get more and more things that are made out of ice. And you're
talking about the outer belt, not the Kuiper belt, right?
The main, yes, I'm talking about the main belt. Yes, which is right in there. Now, Kuiper belt is right at the edge, and it's a perfect example of how that frost line works. Because like out there, nitrogen can freeze. You've got nitrogen ice. You've got methane ice. You've got all that. Closer in, you've got water ice, and methane and ammonia can still freeze there, but not nitrogen.
Is the Oort cloud beyond the frost line?
Oh, far, far beyond. Yeah. The Oort cloud it extends so very, very far, and it's beyond the Kuiper belt. And it's just a really, really big disparate cloud of objects.
So the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter is the inner belt, and the Kuiper belt is the outer belt.
Yeah. And and the frost line by definition is right at the boundary of the asteroid belt, because it's like anything within that, you've got rocky planets. If there's water, it's either going to sublimate and disappear if there's no atmosphere to protect it, or it's going to be in a liquid form on the surface if, in fact, there's a decent enough atmosphere. And and so that name there, the fracture, is basically everything, the inner solar system, the outer solar system, right? The battle line has been drawn right between them. And can't really say much more on that without giving stuff away. But those are on Amazon. And the publisher, they're going to be republished in the near future, because the publisher I'd been using all this time had suffered some real setbacks due to the pandemic. But they're still going to be there one way or another. And I'm working on one right now, which sort of connects those books to future books I had planned. And it's called Traverse, and it's about a generation ship and how they're going through interstellar space and dealing with just about every possible contingency that can emerge, because yeah, traveling through interstellar space in a big, massive ship because you don't have FTL. It's fraught with peril. So much.
Hopefully, it's not like the 100. So,
no.
Very good.
Yeah.
You know, I actually really enjoy this. I'm a small, petty man, so I enjoy when someone who I think is objectively more knowledgeable than I am about space and science, and being a writer yourself, you're probably objectively better about storytelling, or at least organizational story. So I enjoy that when my thought processes don't, shock you, and that you agree with some of them. Doesn't mean you have to absorb them all, but that that my confusion and my plot holes and my solutions are not, so out of space. So that's good. So it validates, my self-proclaimed level of near genius. But it's good, and I'm almost happy that you didn't have so many takes that were different. I mean, it might have made for new insights or whatnot, but I'm also glad that I got the show right, even where the show got itself wrong, or at least within the realm of acceptable interpretation. So that's cool. I'm giving myself a pat on the back there, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'd encourage that too, because it's like, there's nothing really that separates a person who has written something influential and a person who is intrigued by it and sort of a fan of it, and it's like you just got to apply your craft and learn how to the right and or best way for you to deliver that, and that's something I learned writing there, because 2017 was when my first book was published, but I've been writing many years before that, trying to find my voice and such. So yeah, it's like it does start with the thought process and the questioning and trying to get into just the headspace of the story, and that I've been doing that for many years, and it finally paid off.
So now that we've gone through our exposition of Battlestar Galactica, you think maybe you'd come back in a month or so, and we can do it again on Babylon 5?
Totally.
All right, and then maybe one day I'll catch up with The Expanse.
Yeah, and in fact, Babylon 5 and The Expanse too, especially some of the latter season stuff. It's definitely stuff I want to get into, because with Babylon 5 for sure, that's part of what inspired me to write in the first place there, just how the kind of ideas they got into, and I thought, wow. And it introduced me.
I'm very excited. So great.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna do Babylon 5. I know in the past we talked about we'll do something about just science fiction, generally sort of the evolution of it. And in that time, it will buy me enough time to actually rewatch the first 3 seasons of The Expanse and get caught up. And then we'll plan that one, and then from there maybe we'll figure out what our next thing. But in the interim, I'm sure I'll call upon you for something related to Garden Views. But this was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was a lot of fun for the audience. If you didn't watch Battlestar Galactica, it probably wasn't. But keep the episode. Watch Battlestar Galactica. Follow my advice if you like on the interim of watching it, and then listen to the show again and let me know what you think, or let Matt know what you think.
Yes. You need to do this, people. You need to watch the show, okay? It's kind of a big deal.
And help me, folks. If I got something completely wrong, or you have a different interpretation, let me know. I'm talking to you, Jonah Goldberg, who ignored my my DM and isn't listening to the show anyway, and this will probably never get to him. But I know you love the show, and I love to joke. The Cylons had a plan, but they didn't have a plan, and we could have talked about it with a science fiction author, no less. Anyway, so thank you again. Let the folks know where they can. I mean, obviously they can Matt Williams, Amazon. They can find your 3 books. You've got your podcast coming out. It's going to be, I think, what international ITSP.
Yeah, which stands for the intersection of technology and society. Also, their original, their working title is that, but the full-on title is technology and cybersecurity, because they used to talk about that almost exclusively. But so ITSP Magazine is now a podcast channel with many hosts, many shows that deal with a huge variety of topics, and they asked me to come on and to be their space guy. There's a guy in space. Yeah.
And you write for a couple of websites as well, Interesting Engineering, and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the other one already.
Universe Today.
Universe Today, and that's the one that's associated with Fraser Cain, who the Astronomy Cast is his podcast with Dr. Pamela Gay. Very good Astronomy Cast. They're up to episode 646 now, so it's not like a fly by night. They've been doing it for a long time. So
yes. And
so I think that we go on. So I'm sorry.
I was going to say it was that show where Pamela Gay and Fraser were talking about relativity. That was what finally made relativity click in my mind, because it's a very hard concept to explain in accessible terms. But yeah, Einstein always said, if you can't explain something to an 8-year-old to the point that it would make sense to an 8-year-old, you don't get it yourself. So yeah, I decided, game on. And Einstein's theory, that's going to be my brass ring there. If I can explain that finally to an 8-year-old, then I know I understand.
Well, you explained it on Garden Views pretty well. So for those of you who want to hear Matt explain it, he did so on the episode of Garden Views, in situ resource utilization.
Utilization, yeah. Well, I explained some of it there, but I would like to have a chance to give them the full brief, because yeah.
I'm afraid I will give you that chance. Not on this show, but I assure you will get that chance. We'll find one show where it's ready to do. That's probably more for Garden. Well, it could be a hockey show. Anyway, that's for me to worry about, and you to enjoy when we do it. So again, I thank you very much, folks. Please rate and review. Give us 5 stars. Write a review. It really does help. Share with your friends. Share with Facebook groups you're on, Twitter groups. Anyone who might be interested in sci-fi, science. Just a podcast that's a little bit different, that has a variety. I like to think that if you listen long enough, you can give up 19 podcasts, because we're like 20 podcasts in one. So anyway, thanks again to our guest. Thanks to my producer in the back there, Jimmy. Appreciate it. We have a special guest producer here, Jimmy T from Down Under. He's right now he's upside down and counterclockwise, and he's in the future. So he already knows the show's going to be super. Thanks, folks. We will hear you next week on Garden of Doom. That's a wrap.
Those who believe that life here began out there, far across the universe, with tribes of humans who may have been the forefathers of the Egyptians, or the Toltecs, or the Mayans. Some believe that there may yet be brothers of man who even now fight to survive somewhere beyond the heavens.
Thank you.